Gleeson, Colin Farrell, and composer Carter Burwell.
He's great. He's a shit. He's
Go on, Colin.
somewhere between good and great. No, he's extraordinary. No, I mean, from the first time I met Martin, he was talking about he'd already worked with Brendan and they'd done Six Shooter. I don't know if any of you have seen the short film, the Six Shooter that Martin won Best Short that year. And then he was doing his first feature film and we met for In Bruges. And from the first time I met him to talk about In Bruges, I actually tried to talk him out of casting me for it. But thank God he didn't listen to me and he hasn't listened to me a day since. But he's just an extraordinarily singular mind in cinema. He just mixes, as you've all seen, he mixes tones, hilarity and humour mixed with horror and pain, and it can dip into the macabre, and then it can be also euphoric and always really honest, no matter how heightened it is. And I just loved working with him the 3 times we have, and I've loved the casts and the crews that he brings together. It's a really personal experience for Martin making a film. Like, he really loves doing what he does, and he surrounds himself with people that he likes and he trusts. And so to be in that environment for me is a really, really gorgeous thing, and it's just brilliant material, you know. But as a director as well, I was delighted to see him get nominated for director, because he'd had nominations before as a writer. To see him, about time, he says, to see him get nominated as a director, because I think he's such a brilliant writer that people find it hard to see past the quill, and you know, and to see that you actually design your films so meticulously and give such attention to detail. And he allows us actors 3 weeks of rehearsal before we get to the set for the first time, and you never get that in film, you know. So they're the 17
Yeah,
years.
and I think it's a testament to anybody who's the people. When you look at the people that he surrounds himself with. So when you go onto a set, or in any of in the theatre plays or anywhere where it's a collaborative exercise, in order to get pushed through, obviously, what his vision has been and what he's crafted. There's a beautiful sort of sense of everybody being there for the right reason and there for the same reason, which is to try to elevate the bar for each other and for, you know, the work. So it's like there are a few extraordinary things. I worked with Martin on this first short that he had done, and I remember him kind of having a little bit of doubt about whether, you know, directing things would be where he went. And I remember talking to him saying, well, do you want anybody else to take charge of this work? His work is so specific. But watching how his progression as a director and the different skill sets that you need, apart from the writing of something, but the incorporation of people's different personalities on set, being able to kind of man and woman manage is not an easy thing, and he surrounds himself with people who are challenging, you know, the writings in terms of bringing it into different places, and then it means that there are a lot of disparate personalities. And one of the great skills of a film director, apart from all that preparation that Colin's talking about, and all the kind of meticulous nature of the way, and the ability to see what he sees, and the minutest of things, making the difference between great and brilliant. All of that is done while keeping the cast extraordinarily loyal and wanting to be there every moment. Like, you know, there were tough days, but nobody ever did not want to be there. Do you know what I mean? And that's down to him.
Martin, do you feel like being a writer and a director are 2 roles? Do you kind of start as a writer, does it take over, and then you become the director of the project?
I think so, yeah. They're quite separate in lots of ways in my head. The writing, when I'm writing it, I'm not even necessarily picturing the images and all that kind of stuff. That will be the sort of story. I start out with the storyboarding process immediately after the script is written. And then when you're on set, you're not really thinking about the writing at all. Although, as Brendan said, we have rehearsal periods each time, so the writer is still in the room then. Yeah, it does feel like 2 different people in some ways.
Yeah, you know, I would love to hear from Colin and Brendan. You know, this breakup that we see at the beginning of the film between Patrick and Colin. We don't have the backstory for why they were friends in the first place. Is that something that you talked about with Martin, to understand who these people were together before we see this kind of severance between their friendship?
Well, for me, there was an innate understanding that there was a kind of there was a kinship. You know, let's face it, your choices are a little bit limited on an island. So it means you get to talk to people. It's one of the terrible things I've watched over my lifetime is to see how the generations have split. Like, there's so many other people have split, it's getting ridiculous anyway, kind of in the way people are separated from each other. But one of the great things that you'd notice about the West of Ireland when I started going down there first, and to a certain extent still there, so people of all generations talk to each other an awful lot in a way that is, you know, on a par with each other. So what was interesting about that relationship for me was that as we moved along, I began to see more and more how Colin would value the beauty of somebody who was so connected as Pádraig, without any go-between. There was nature, animals, the sky, the world, Pádraig. Seamless. It was seamless. Whereas Colin had this thing with art that he wanted to film it, he was making something of it, so there was a kind of a sheet. So I had no problem, the longer we did it, and when we were rehearsing, the more we chatted about it, finding the connection they would have, it was such a relief from a banging head to have this beautiful man chatting there about pony shite. It was wonderful. Relaxing and real. And there was no artifice in getting in the way of anything. But obviously when his sort of thing took over, stop you laughing.
You don't know what you've got until it's gone, as they say.
So that was for me, like, and what was good about it, you know, we've been asked a lot because we've been great friends since Bruges, like with the whole crew really, but it's just, you know, what was it like to have a sundering to start? One of the things I kind of felt again, and maybe Martin will say whether it was in his head or not, but you didn't have to actually see the earlier relationship because I don't know, there was something in there anyway, in the ether that it felt as, yeah, of course we could be friends, why wouldn't we be friends? So why did you need to see it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's like a counterpoint. I mean, if we were just in each other's lives in some kind of moderate version of a friendship, well then you wouldn't have to be as aggressively pursuant of following that line in the sand. You wouldn't have to make these kind of really violent, awful dictums. You know, it was kind of like because of the depth between the two of them that you were severing,
Yeah.
that you had to go somewhere that was as ugly as the place that you went. Yeah, I mean, I think my fella, I think it's funny listening to you because we've been talking for a while now, the lot of us, and I'm still learning bits about the films. Not all the time because we have heard the same answers a number of times as well. But every now and then I learn something new about it and make me think more about it, and that's again a testament to Martin's writing and the depth of it, that it survives such kind of constant interrogation. And but yeah, I think the thing about what you're saying about, like, for Pádraig, I don't think Pádraig can believe that you're his pal. Like, I think there's a part of him that's suspicious that, like, he sees the best of himself because he knows you're cultured, he knows you're intelligent, he knows you're a wonderful musician, and all these things that he thinks are just, they're kind of arrive him at a place of idolatry. When they're taken away, they're confirmations of his lack. You know, and so that's the thing. It's like sometimes, you know, we see the best of ourselves in our friends.
Yeah.
In our friends' eyes, and how our friends look at us, or our family's eyes, or whatever. And sometimes you could call that drinking the Kool-Aid, but sometimes it's sincere. We find it hard to. Pádraig wouldn't have any ability to access the things he's saying, which he did say when we were shooting as well, which were beautiful and helped me, about Pádraig being connected to nature and all. I never even thought of that, and as soon as Brendan said it to me when we were working together, I thought, geez, that's very true. He just has this kind of innate connection to life in a kind of a lovely, kind of guileless way, but there is a harmony, there's a balance there. But a lot of my ability to inhabit that beauty was predicated upon the belief that I was worthy of, or Pádraig's belief that he was worthy of the approval and the friendship of Colin. And so when it's gone that day, it's like there's a death knell that is just banged loudly, and that's it really. That's a bit of a downer. You saw the film! There's like one happy moment and it's 30 seconds in. And that's it.
You know, Kerry, I think that your character is so interesting.
Myself, Kerry kind of felt like Siobhan in the sense that I could see both their points of view. Like, even now, I don't have a side, you know, because I feel like he was kind enough to be honest with Pádraig, you know? Well, like nowadays, no one fucking bothers doing that. Don't they now? They just like ignore the person.
It's hard to ghost somebody on the island.
Well, yeah.
No, totally. You're right.
You know what I mean?
That was my first port of call, actually.
I just stopped texting him.
So that was easy for me to understand where she stood in that place. And then, like, all the other stuff, like, it's really hard for me to explain how do I act. Like, I honestly have a blackout. Like, I don't know, like, you know, I don't really remember doing it. Like, you know, I suppose, like, I don't even remember the questions. No, I'm not that bad.
That's a great answer. I appreciate that.
I remember the question, and I remember her. If I ever remember her. She was like brilliant. Where I worked with Kerry 20 years ago, we did one scene together, and it was massive fun and stuff. But she was extraordinary to work with. She's such an extraordinary actress. Like really, so honest and so just present and in the moment. And she and Martin would have a little chat, and Martin would give an idea, and she'd go, right, so, and then boom, and just apply it in the most beautiful and personal and realistic way. And I was just trying to keep up, you know. When I saw the film, I was asked the other day, what was your favourite scene in the film? And I was, geez, what is the one? And I realised, I'm just going with it still. It was the scene in the boat, because I never saw that. And when I saw it first, the film first, I mean, my ego kicked in, and I was like, why is she fucking smiling on the boat? She just left me forever. Right, so I was still personalising it. But then I got over that in a second, and I realised how moving that was, and how bold that was, and how brilliant that was, and the expense of that brief smile. Because then it turned, of course, again to concern, because she's sitting in the cliff's edge, and she sees this other shadow, and yada yada. But she had made the decision. She cut the tie. She'd done what people have to do sometimes in their lives. She'd made a really hard, faithful decision to create a change so that she could survive and she could see what else was waiting for her out in the world. And I think she is the representation of hope in the film. For me, as far as I see it, she is the representation. And it's no coincidence that she's a female, and it's no coincidence that she spent her whole life mothering, not just being a sister, but mothering Pádraig. I love Pádraig, right? But he's selfish. I mean, the second question he asks is, who's going to cook the dinner? Do you know what I mean? And then kind of, what about me? What about, yeah. Oh, I thought you forgot the first one. Yeah. Anyway, brilliant.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
No, well, and just to add to that, absolutely, the working of the scenes where we confronted each other, or you confronted me, you know, you work with people where you achieve what you hoped to, and then you work with people where you're slaloming down the hill and you just have somebody there, right there, and whatever way it twists and turns, that's where it's going to go, and see where it lands. And with Kerry and with Martin's direction, we did very different versions of things, didn't we? It was just such a pleasure to be in there, and if it kicked in that was the reality of the way the scene went that day, on that take, that was fully what was going to happen. And it was really, it was just a joy, Kerry. I mean, you're wonderfully instinctive, but intelligent, and able, when the direction came then, I remember we talked at one stage, it was about just the laugh and thing. Yeah, you talk about that.
Was hard. He said, you know the scene where I come to him with the finger at his house, and, well, you know, what you want from him to end all this, one more boring man and INISHERIN. Martin was like, do one take where every line is like you're just laughing at him. And I was like, that's a terrible idea. And it sounds really hard too. It's like, how can I wing all of them? And we tried it, and it felt weird, but...
It was weird, because I was saying, I don't know if I'd reveal all that I tell you about feeling the downside that you have, and all the kind of, like, I think you know what I'm talking about, really, if you were laughing at me. But it just brought this other dynamic into it. It was pretty amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was, and I think at least one of those lines remained in it.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah, because it's. But I think scenes like that, you're both coming from a place of truth anyway, so you can have a little variation in terms of laughing or angry but the baseline is truth, and that always comes through in every take.
Yeah.
Definitely, that's something that's interesting to me, because you can find some new sound, some new expression that hasn't been done before, ideally. And I mean, in this particular film, yeah, there is no genre, right? It barely has a plot.
It has a little bit of a plot. Composers.
But it's because of everything that everyone has just been saying. The performances are so grounded. I basically hardly ever played anyone's actual emotion of any of the characters at any point in the film, because it's all so there and so real that the music has this, I don't know, it wasn't a conscious effort, but instead what it kind of does is lifts you out of the place and the time, and makes it a little, it's just something different. And sometimes simply having music tell you that there's something different going on than what you're seeing is enough to recontextualize everything, I think, for the viewer. But that, so that's this movie. But Martin and I have done 3 other films, and each of them is different, even though they're all indelibly Martin McDonagh, films. But I feel like the music's played a different role in each of them.
Who decides on it? Yeah.
Well, I'm very curious, like, what conversations do you have about with Carter about what you want the movie to sound like, or do you let him kind of go first?
All I knew on this one that I knew it didn't want the typical Irish go-to sounds or instruments or tunes almost. I think that was probably our earliest conversation, wasn't it, Carter?
Right, that was before you even shot. We were, I believe your words were, I hate that deedle-dee old world Irish string music. And you literally
Jesus,
wrote
hang
that
on a
all
second.
out.
Your stuff.
Don't tell Brendan.
Yeah, I'm going to get into so much trouble back in Ireland.
I remember it pretty strongly. So yeah, then I had no idea what to do. But when you had shot it, when I was watching it, it began to, form into some other approach. That in the end, I didn't intend this, but I was about halfway through and I realized I was kind of playing it more like a fairy tale or a fable, and that I was actually like reading Grimm's to my daughter actually one day. While I was about halfway through the score, I was reading Grimm's fairy tale version of Cinderella, and in that the evil stepmother has her daughters cut off parts of their feet to fit into the slipper. Wow. I was reading it to Greta, and I thought, this reminds me of something that I'm working on. And it didn't change the music, but it made me understand why what I was doing was working. It was turning it into a bit of a fable, and it allows it to be, you don't really believe he's cutting off his fingers necessarily, or you don't have to reflect on it that way. You can take it a little more abstractly, allegorically, whatever. So that's where it ended up. But yeah, we have one conversation at the beginning when we watch the film together, and then I'll send Martin things and we talk. But we're never in the same place really again. The next time I see you, we were in Abbey Road recording. But this one came together, we had hardly any disagreements about anything. The one that I remember we did change really was the scene where you've just been beaten by the policeman, and your character helps him up into the cart. And it's a fairly long scene, but of course no dialogue because you both are not talking to each other at this point. So I have this piece of music that plays along, and I was sort of developing it as it went along, and your characters really sort of started to fall apart through the pain of not being able to talk to your friend sitting right next to you. So I had the music kind of develop as that went along and get bigger and more emotional. And Martin just said, it could do with less. And they just basically took everything out except 2 instruments. And then all of that restraint it's true, it made it even more painful to watch. The fact that the music refused to give you that release made it much more painful. And it was a really, really good note.
Wow, good call, Mark.
But
Good call, Carter.
Do you keep all the music, all the versions? Like, do you have the longer version? I'm not gonna
oh yeah, I'll be using it in another film.
Speaking of music, Brendan.
that he wrote that singular piece.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, which was astonishing, really, that you could have such purpose and such purchase over the character, and that it would come from somewhere so visceral within you, like that the piece of music that becomes the Banchees of INISHERIN. Brendan, anyway, go ahead, please. If you
No, thanks, but it was like, it was again, Martin played some trust. You know, I said I'd love to have a go at making up something for the thing, and Martin said, yeah, well, Carter Burwell's doing the music, and the best, you know, like, you're only up if he's a better. Like I said, okay, it's only honestly, I just love to try it and see if it works. But I was absolutely thrilled when it was okay. I couldn't think of it for ages, and the film kept getting pushed back, and I had all sorts of ideas that playing away. But my fiddle, I left it in to be mended before the pandemic, and the guy who was mending it from Slovakia, and he ended up going back to Slovakia and getting locked down in COVID, and the whole thing 18 months before I got the damn thing back, 12 months or something. So I was kind of waiting, Jesus, like I hope. No, but it wouldn't happen properly.
Yeah.
And when I got my own fiddle back, it was there within a week. It was kind of almost, it fell out, and it was like, but it just felt, being trusted to be able to do it meant technically, even, you know, especially when the fingers started to become compromised, mea culpa. It just felt that I inhabited it from the beginning, so I did actually kind of feel invested in it, and easy about the technical. I'm not that great a fiddle player, so it was like the technical of having to cope with something that it was a strain. I wanted it to be part of my DNA in a way, and relieved when it was, you know, when it worked out. But again, just like in terms of I understood, and by the way, just to clarify, you know, I think that decision to go with a completely different, I love traditional music, I understand very, very well, and I would never downplay its importance as an art form, because I really do, I could go on all night about it. But I do think it becomes cliched as a kind of a carpet on which to do a very Irish drama, and I think it was absolutely the right decision, and the Diddley Eye stuff would have been completely wrong. And especially when you see you had Carter lifted, I mean, this is extraordinary for me, even hearing this tonight. I just love every second of it. It's amazing. This way, cinema is such a collaborative exercise. It's extraordinary, so beautiful. Like, but the Diddley Eye music even that we put in were friends of mine, some of them, and then other people that I hadn't known. And Martin said, will you give me a few names and things like that? So these were people, and it was an older type of music. An awful lot of the younger musicians are very, very accomplished, but these lads play with a certain kind of it wasn't Flash Harry stuff.
Yeah.
Some of them are really extraordinary musicians, but it wasn't Flash Harry stuff. It was what people play when traditional music is just music. That's the only thing there is, and that's what they do. So it became, again, I felt it was a kind of a character another performer in the thing was the actual music, and the two musics had different functions and different roles, you know. So again, it's very rich tapestry for me, and as I say, to be trusted was pretty special.
I love that idea of the music.
I'm always more interested when the animals are on set. I'm much more interested in them than in the actors, especially Jenny. Jenny was Jenny.
Yeah, Jenny.
But we all kind of fell in love with Jenny, I think. She's just such a beautiful little character. And I actually cast Jenny a year before. And we hung out for a year, and it was like. But yeah, no, and Morse the dog was a dream. But also, we forget Minnie the horse was a much smaller part originally, and we cast her on the island. In fact, if you go to Inishmore today, probably, she's one of the horses that take tourists around on a horse and cart. But she was so gentle and characterful, you know, she was just from another planet or something. So I added her much more to in the scene where we discover Jenny's body. that was a new addition the morning of shooting. And I think the horse, I mean, Colin's performance is amazing, heartbreaking, but but it's mostly about the horse. But Carl, don't you think there's something?
The way she looks at him crying,
and it looks as if she thinks the
Totally, to quote George Orwell, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. But there was a degree of, and it's one of the most wonderful things of working with animals is they're just so honest. Just so honest. I mean, you don't want to ever have, and I've worked on films with animals involved before, and you don't want to ever be with a trainer that you see treats the animal as, because you can break any animal, Jesus, you can break human beings, you can break horses, you can break, and there's a certain point that it should never reach or anything close to on a film, and there is a way, and it takes longer and a bit more patience, but you have a great love for animals, Mark, and you were very vocal about Jenny being treated. Not that she was ever mistreated, but just giving her time.
Patience,
Giving her time, that was all. But Minnie was, I was going to say Minnie was an animal. You heard it here first. But she was amazing, Minnie. She was so, and they're all of them their first film, but Minnie was incredible. She really was.
Oh, and the cows and the calf too.
Yeah, all of them. I mean, it was really, but they were the But when all this chaos was going on in the island, because everyone's complicit. Everyone's complicit. You know, Dominic's father's complicit. Mrs. McCormick's complicit. The old bag talking about no news, shite news. She's complicit. The priest is complicit. He's complicit. I'm complicit by my need. And we're all complicit. But the animals aren't in any way, shape, or form. So the profundity of their innocence is something that I think is felt throughout the whole film, you know? I think it's great having so many. Even the birds are so bold. The birds hopping around and one bird fecking the other bird off screen. The allegory was not low, but it was beautiful and earned, and there's just truth everywhere when the animals come on, and there's kind of poison when the human beings are there a lot of the time, you know?
But even the kind of the situation where you're moving past when Morse started to take the shears. It's like
the interruption there becomes.
It's getting into that place like fairy tale there, in a way, and it's part of what you do, Mark, with extraordinary kind of success about bridging. This is obviously larger than life, and then it's kind of mythic, and there's this kind of netherworld in the middle where anything is almost possible, and just being able to marshal those forces. Like, it's an extraordinary, and Michael, we met Michael today, you know, I happened to be the editor, all of, you know, to be able to continue that line through. I mean, the dog has taken the shears away as if he understands, you know, the tragedy of the situation in a way, or maybe it was just coincidence, you know. I mean, it's a remarkably bold thing, isn't it?
Yeah. But you go with it because it has the feeling of a fable or something above or something heightened,
There was lots of that, wasn't there? The bit you were speaking about when I come around and Jenny's dead. Minnie did do a thing where she looked at me and she...
Yeah.
And that wasn't a cue at all. Like the strangest things, or the rainbow even. I know that's not an animal, but... I'm Colin, not Corey. Very vulnerable up here. But the rainbow came and we all got so excited down by the harbour. We're all like, quick, grab the camera, there's a fucking rainbow! And we shot it, and then I was thinking, you can't actually have that in the film. They'll all go, that was CGI, that was ridiculous. Oh, Diddley Idle, talk about Diddley Idle, how Irish leprechauns next. But it was there.
As in the director's cut.
Yeah. I just felt like nature was smiling upon us in a really profound way.
Yeah.
You know, and the summer that it was as well it was a Mediterranean summer off the west coast of Ireland, and it rained twice. It was extraordinary, you know. It was just, it was a very special time.
Congratulations. To all of you. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you all for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Awesome! Great work!
You can knock it on the stage.
Great work! Fantastic work!
It was very bright. I know.